Hey everyone, Genome here. Just gonna bring something to you a little bit different than what I normally do. I'm gonna be probably starting a series of some of my favorite comic books. Um, this would be mostly from the time when I was collecting heavily, and that was back in the late '80s and early '90s. I kind of got off the comics train pretty early, say into the runs of X Force. Around that time, around issues 5 or 6. I don't know if I was kind of disillusioned at the time because all the price guides said that X Men #1 should be worth $50 in 2 months, and I think you still buy it at cover price to this day. But yeah, I kind of gotten out of that game. But every now and then I will revisit some of my favorite issues. I don't have a whole lot left. I've actually gone over it in some other videos before, but I'd say 90% of my collection was ruined by a burst pipe in a wall that I had. And actually, the comic I'm going to kind of highlight today is actually the recipient of some of that water damage as well. Hopefully, it'll come through on the picture. But yeah, so many things that I lost, key issues that I spent my hard-earned, teenage money on back then when I didn't have any money, are just down in the proverbial tubes, as it were. And I still kept some of them, the ruin, just so I can revisit them time to time, because like as not, I read pretty much every issue that I had back then. I kept everything in sleeves and in boxes, but I didn't necessarily try too hard or worry too much about keeping them in very fine condition, all that. We didn't really have hardcore grading system back then. It was basically just eyeballed. It looked pretty good to me. There was no creasing in the spine. The edges were fine. There weren't staples from your little brother punched all through it, or markers all over it, and coffee stains from setting your mug on it. And those are usually pretty passable in a lot of the LCSs that I used to go to. So while I did try, with backing and, well, we didn't call it Mylar back then, we just called it sleeves, to keep things in good shape, a lot of my comics were sitting in a box, completely unprotected. So, hey, it is what it is. I was like ages 13 through about 17, so. And the problem, too, with my collecting back then had a lot to do with the fact that I really wasn't, let me get this focused a little bit. I really wasn't that good at focusing on one hobby. I also was a huge sports card collector, which I have many of still. And luckily, those were not in the same place as the comics were, so they're all in pretty good shape. I haven't even looked at them in years, so I'm not exactly sure what I can have anymore. But stuff like Carmelo rookie cards and Steel Argent rookie cards, that sort of thing. So I probably spent more money in sports cards than I did in comics, but I spent a substantial amount in comics. And for a young teen, I started working real early. So I usually had ready cash available. Of course, it burned a hole in my pocket every Friday or whatever. But I had it. So I wasn't depending on the charity of others who go out and collect. I was doing it on my own. So that's just a little brief rundown of my history in the comics world. But I've never really gotten back into it since, and it's a shame. As far back as I remember, during those times, it was such a great hobby for me. And every 10 years or so, I'll probably break open the box again and start rereading through most of my issues again, just because most of the ones I had I really liked. I wasn't the kind of guy who went out and just bought everything and hit the stands. I was pretty particular about the stuff that I read, but sometimes you go by just referrals too from like the LCS owners. Because we didn't have the internet back then, so you didn't read about it in Wizard magazine or hear about it from LCS or another buddy who's a collector. You didn't really know that much, and none of my other friends really were big comic collectors. So yeah, it was real insular about what was coming down the pipe and what was going to be good, what wasn't going to be good. So, but as everyone has any interest in comics knows this is kind of the heyday of comics, but also where things kind of went off the rails a little bit in the fact that they just started printing so many copies of everything. I mean, you have to think about this. Back then, a bad book was selling 100,000 units. And today that's their prime seller. That's Spider-Man stuff nowadays. X-Men #1 was what, 8 or 9 million units moved. It's insane. X-Force was about the same. Might have been like around 5 or 6. They had the whole trading guard sleeve gimmick, but it went a little crazy, and they saturated the market so badly. But at the same time, can you really blame them? People were buying them. And they had a lot of great IPs, a lot of good ideas, a lot of great stuff was written back then. I'm not going to say the quality was bad. There was an influx of maybe too much variant covers and, foil embossments and covers, that kind of a little crazy and little gimmicks like that. But, I mean, there was some quality content, some quality artists back then. I mean, look at the corral of artists that Marvel, just take Marvel, for example, had back then, I mean, Lee, Liefeld, Lim, I mean, just to name a few, all under the same banner, and it was an incredible time to be a collector, and I kind of got out when I smelled trouble, and unfortunately I never got back into it. So I'm sure I've missed a lot. So I'm sure a lot of my contemporaries would kind of laugh at how I did it, but that was just me. So I grew up, well, not so much grew up, but I kind of grew out of it, I'd say, and maybe I was a little too harsh with that. So, but anyway, that hugely rambling intro to that is not what you came here to see, and I'll keep those to a minimum in the future. But what you did come here probably to see was which comic I selected. So, for those who have seen some of my past videos where I did video entries, my favorite comic book villains, favorite comic books, that sort of thing, everyone knows that the Punisher is my favorite character. And, of course, Punisher #1 was probably my favorite comic book of all time. Closely contested with Return to Big Nothing, another Punisher. That was with Beatty Zek. But yeah, he was my favorite character of all time. And so, of course, I'm maybe a little biased about what storylines I liked and what issues I liked. And, several of the prominent ones will feature him. So, hey, that's just the breaks. But, so today I'm going to go a little bit off the wall and pull an issue here that I think was grossly underrated, and it didn't get talked about back then. And unfortunately, this issue is hampered by some very questionable art. It's just okay. We'll just leave it at that. I'm not saying it's horrible, but I'm not sure if it befits a comic of this caliber. And this is actually going to be What If number 26. And the whole premise is this one is, let me get my dumb fingers out of the way. What if the Punisher had killed Daredevil? And this kind of harkens back to, I think it was Punisher War Journal 6 or 7. I have them somewhere. I didn't dig them out for this video. Another funny aside on that is I wanted those issues so badly back when I was, heavy collecting back in the early 90s and all. But I think those things were running between 40 and 50 bucks a pop. And I went into an LCS probably, I don't know, mid-2000s, just on a whim. It was next door to a place I was going to anyway. And I went in there, and he had quite a selection. And I was looking through some of the old, key issues I was looking for. And lo and behold, there it was. I got the vaunted Daredevil fight. And I think I bought them for like $4 a piece or something crazy like that. And I just couldn't believe the price difference. And at that same comic store, I also bought the Punisher War Journals, Punisher vs. Wolverine. And those were only like, it might have been even cheaper. It might have been like $3 or something like that. So, yeah, it was pretty crazy, that eye-opening thing. And it kind of harkens back to this fight and what goes on in this issue. So I'll just give you some stats on this one. This was 91, I believe. Yeah, 1991, June. Cover price $1.25. And let's see. This is writer Kurt Busiek, artist Luke McDonnell, letterist Janice Chiang, Colorist Tom Vincent, who's done some great work in the past as well. Editor Craig Anderson, and of course the editor-in-chief Tom DeFalco, which is pretty much the editor-in-chief between him and Jim Shooter most of my time of collecting comics. So, yep, this is. I'll go ahead and put some pictures up from time to time if I can find something to add to give you more of a visual reference, other than me just holding the book up for the entire time. But the funny thing is, while the Punisher didn't have much of a neck on the cover, he's actually not drawn horribly throughout. Let's see if I can find a good example for you. I don't want to wait too long, but figures I'm hitting every page but the Punisher. I mean, it's not some great ones, but just perspective shots, Pretty good use of lighting and all that. I love this picture right here where he's jumping down. This is definitely the definite best panel of the book by far. Actually, one of my favorite Punisher panels of all time. Hopefully it's coming through. Just a great little visual. You make up little pinpricks of his eyes there too as he's jumping on those hapless guards. So, what's the premise of the book? Well, the What If series kind of takes a look around at what could be. The Watcher, I believe his name is Uatu, just takes a look at the different timelines and what transpires in them. So if this is not necessarily in, what I believe it's the 616 timeline, so it's just a what if scenario, and this one was a classic. Most of them were pretty goofy. Some got haphazard, but this one was it was a really mature and kind of violent story. I'll give you the quick breakdown of it. Spoiler alert, if you're going to read this book, if you have an interest in reading it, you might want to stop now. I won't give away too much. I won't give away the ending. How's that? But I definitely think anyone who has any interest in the character or comics should definitely check this one out. Anyway, the Punisher gets into his famous fight with Daredevil, and he shoots him with a tranquilizer dart. He didn't mean to kill Daredevil, but Daredevil was by a ledge, and once he got tranked, he went over the ledge and fell to his death. This enraged the other superheroes in and around the city, especially Spider-Man, because we all know that Spider-Man and the Punisher had some pretty high amount of animosity between each other because of the Punisher's methods, as opposed to Peter Parker's, Boy Scout altruistic methods. Long story short, Spider-Man can't stand the Punisher because of what he does, but he deals with him. Funny aside, I'm full of these funny asides, aren't I? Is that there's a later miniseries. What was that called? Was it Round Robin? I think it was. It was in Spider-Man. It had everybody in it. It had like Moon Knight, Punisher. I think Night Thrasher was in there. It had like 6 different superheroes in there. It was pretty crazy. It was a pretty good story too. I'll have to go over that one at some point. But in that one, the Punisher gets injured, and he starts kind of hallucinating a little bit, and he kind of goes through the death of his family, and Spider-Man didn't know about all this, supposedly, anyway, and says, well, that could really change a person if that happened to somebody. He kind of a little bit saw on the Punisher side, so, maybe his eyes were open a little bit later on to what he was all about. But anyway, in this book, Spider-Man kind of goes on and on a little bit about how he had many chances to stop the Punisher, and he never did, and he should have before this happened. So Spider-Man goes out looking for a Punisher, and Punisher's just out doing his Punisher things, stalking bad guys and stopping big drug deals going on, and Spider-Man's getting in the way of this because he traps him once. Punisher escapes. It might have been 2 escapes, actually. It's pretty cool because Punisher keeps going back to his backup plans. He gets to a site ahead of time, and he plants some different ways to help him get away. A little bit unrealistic, but pretty cool. I mean, actually, it's very keeping of the character that was written before. But so what happens after all this is, through one of the instances where the Punisher can't get away, he has to shoot Spider-Man. He shoots him in the shoulder. He tries not to kill him, and he doesn't kill him. But Spider-Man tries to get away, and he loses too much blood, and he gets weak, and he passes out right in the middle of the sidewalk and everybody. So he's carted off to the hospital, and now everyone knows Spider-Man's secret identity. So the criminal underworld is like gunning for Spider-Man. I think he's under armed guard in the hospital, but who isn't safe is Aunt May, and was it the Kingpin? I believe the Kingpin featured prominently in the story. He's doing his Kingpin things as well, bribing everyone and kind of pulling the strings. But yeah, he has. I think it's him that has Aunt May's house blown up with Aunt May in it. So here, Peter Parker wakes up. He's injured. The whole world knows who he is now, who Spider-Man is, and now Aunt May is dead. So he is enraged, and he busts out the hospital. He's flying high on opiates or whatever it is they put on him, painkillers they had him on. He confronts the Punisher, and he beats the hell out of him. He's trying to kill him. He's physically going to throw him over a rooftop and kill him. This is how far Spider-Man's been brought down, by these events that have transpired. And so the only chance the Punisher has is one more backpack plan he has. He has another pistol hidden on him, with bullets, not tranks or nothing. And he has to shoot Spider-Man point blank in the chest to keep him from killing him. And so now he kills Spider-Man. Spider-Man's dead. Earlier on, Captain America and some other heroes have wanted to go out hunting for the Punisher too after Daredevil's death. And through some machinations of the Kingpin, the powers that be wouldn't let Cap and them go corral him up, So by the end of all this, the Punisher kind of figures out what's going on, who's setting him up, and setting up other people to get killed. And he figures out it's a Kingpin, right? So he's like, and he's in bad shape. Spider-Man had busted his ribs, splintered his ribs. He's got a perforated lung, punctured lung, So he's got got a sucking chest wound, basically. He's just pulverized. So he's like, he goes for his blaze of glory to get out, and he wants to take down the Kingpin for good. So he goes to fight the Kingpin and confront the Kingpin. And I'll kind of leave it here at that. It's pretty epic what happens. Not so much the fight, but how it transpires after that, and how the story culminates. But it's just such an amazing story, for what a lot of people consider, a throwaway series of just, people who are bored. Someone took a lot of time and care to come up with this story. And I love how it just, it all culminates in one issue. I mean, you could actually come in this book not knowing who any of these characters are, other than they're costume superheroes, right? And learn enough about their characters just in little bits and be satisfied with the way it concludes. It's almost like a one-time graphic novel or something, It's so much better than it really should have been, for, like I said, a series like What If. And What If actually had some decent premises and ideas out there. I just think this was the best one of that time frame and period. And it's one of my favorite comics of all time, and I go back to read it every now and then. And just when you think things can't get worse for a guy, well, superheroes start dying, and then things get real bad. And as a kind of a final thing about it, it's funny, is the ones hunting him, usually the ones hunting the Punisher are the bad guys. And this one, he's being hunted down by the good guys. Kind of egged on by the big bad guy, But yeah, there's kind of a draconic, if you will, ending about it. And once again, fitting with the character. The Punisher is not a character who's going to last. He's a human, complete human. He's damaged goods. He's taken a beating over the years. He's playing around in a world full of crime and superheroes and superpowers and supervillains. He's outclassed everywhere except for among his own element of criminals and underworld sleaze, that sort of thing. But yeah, so he's playing a high stakes game that's rigged against him from the start. So the fact that he lasts as long as he does in the comics or whatever is in itself kind of a small a miracle. But yeah, this comic really encapsulates it. So anyway, hope you liked it. Sorry if the eye contact wasn't great. I was using my Hearthstone webcam here, and Mike, I didn't feel like putting the big camera up and getting everything rigged and running my lab mic and all that. So I just did kind of an impromptu thing. Saw the comic laying here. I had set it aside for this purpose for a later date, but figured, what the heck, I'll go ahead and do it now. So I just kind of freelanced it. So yeah, definitely go give this a shot if you have any interest. If you have any interest in this character or any of the other ones, or just interested in a good story. Once again, this is What If the Punisher had killed Daredevil, issue number 26 of the What If series back then. And give her a try and let me know what you think. Alright, well, thanks for watching this long rambling rant and dissection of a forgotten gem from my youth. So if you enjoyed this, let me know something about it down in the comments, and I'll probably bring more of these to you in the future. And I'll try to keep them, at least the ending, spoiler free, if it's really integral to the story or whatever. So thanks again for watching, and stay tuned for more content like this coming up in the near future. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, this is Genome and the Punisher, out.